I'm Amber.
Hi, I'm Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Corinne.
Hiya, I'm Danielle.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And together we are UnfiltHERed, where the her is no longer silent.
UnfiltHERed is the coming together of 5 neurodivergent women, and together we will be discussing all things neurodiversity: autism, ADHD, parenting, being parent carers, inclusion, and how these are led by our experiences of womanhood.
All voices are welcome here, and we do not discriminate. Our goal is to create a real, inclusive, safe space and community for everyone to be their unfiltered self.
This space is all about community and not competition, empowering others through their differences and removing stigma.
Whether you are here for yourself or a loved one, you are welcome here. So come and join us in this unfiltered conversation today.
Just a quick disclaimer before we begin. Even though we discuss certain medical conditions such as autism and ADHD, we are not medical professionals and cannot offer any medical advice. And this is not a diagnostic tool. This is a tool to be used in terms of your education and to gain support and clarity. But please don't take any medical advice from this. If you do have any concerns, please go and speak to your GP. Also, please note we are all neurodiverse, so you're going to get a lot of talking over each other. We're going to swear a little bit, and sometimes we're going to forget what we're saying mid-sentence, and that's okay. This is a female-based platform that aims to empower the voices of women who often, especially within the neurodivergent community, tend to be lost. As we are all females, we are all born females, we can only give our lived experience as females. But obviously, regardless of gender, you are welcome here, as this aims to be an inclusive space. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to our first official episode of the UnfiltHERed podcast. This week we're going to kick off with a topic that's obviously close to our hearts and a lot of the reasons why we've started this in the first place. We will be speaking about being neurodivergent women and shining a spotlight on the challenges that we face in our lives. So a brief overview, just to give a better understanding of the topic, is as neurodivergent women and the intersectionality that comes with that. I mean, there's challenges with being a woman, but then when you think about what we additionally face when it comes to being neurodivergent, it's like a whole new ballgame. And this would affect things like work, our life responsibilities, being parents and running a household, things like pregnancy, things people wouldn't even consider, whether it be, struggling to express our needs and, the extra strain that's put on us as women. That is also an issue that I know many face. Social expectations, stereotypes, and, many of us haven't been diagnosed until we were adults. There's other things like, relationships, whether it be with your partner or your friends and work colleagues, just everybody as a whole. And that, can be caused by things, how we express ourselves and communicate, and also impacted by RSD if we are, extra sensitive or just taken the wrong way. All of these things affect us majorly. And I think that is the topic that's so important that, it should be spoken about more to help raise awareness, but also to let other neurodivergent women out there know that it isn't just them who are facing these challenges. And it's just really healthy to speak about these things because it can be quite comforting for others who are going through these things. And sometimes they internalize so much, but when they hear others saying, actually, this is how I feel, it validates them and their feelings and can be really helpful. So, yeah.
So what you were saying, internalizing, that was pretty much me up until, because obviously I'm slightly different to you guys. I did have a childhood diagnosis, but again, it was the whole no one told me thing. So I didn't really know what any of it meant. And then, it was only when I started researching it and kind of looking at other people's videos and like all of you guys, and I was like, oh shit, it's not just me. Like, I've actually never had a unique experience in my life. We all feel the same way, but it's just no one's actually talking about it. And I think with women, it's the whole kind of, you've got to be a good girl. Do you know what I mean? That was my thing growing up. It was, oh, you've got to be a good girl. You've got to like do as you're told. And I think girls do have such a different level of expectation put on them to boys. And I mean, I think all we all parents to boys here. And I know even with like my son, obviously he's 5. And I don't know, I just feel like he's way more freer than I've ever been. like if he doesn't want to do something, like even earlier, he made me die. We were walking to school and we saw one of the mums, and I went, oh, hello, morning. I went, you gonna say hello to so and so's mum? And he went, no. Like, sorry, it's a bit savage. But yeah, but even that, like, why do I need to apologise for him? Like, I shouldn't really. He's 5. If he doesn't want to say hello to you, he doesn't have to. But I don't know. I always kind of feel like women, we're trying to fit into this, like, and when you're neurodivergent, especially when you're autistic and ADHD, like, especially for me, like, the social cues and the nuances that go with that are, like, I don't understand them and I don't know they're there. And that's times things have happened. And then it's only been like, oh, you know, you're not meant to do that. And I'm like, oh. And do you find like no one tells you, oh, by the way, like this, or like you were meant to do that.
The F word. But can I just say, as a neurotypical,
Are you neurotypical, Kelly?
I don't think I am, but I don't have an official label.
Neurotypical.
I do massively relate to all of you women, but I think what I can probably do as the oldest in the group is just, I think what we all mutually feel is, as women, there is a huge expectation that women have got their shit together and that actually
we ain't
all right. And then when we're not all right, people panic. It's like it's expected that we are organised, planned. It's just expected that you are able to multitask. It's almost like that gender subconscious thing, you know, where, you know, women can multitask. They can look after kids and cook dinner and pack a bag for tomorrow and plan a family holiday and still be mentally all right. And actually then when we're not, or we show an amount of not being all right with stuff, everyone panics. I think there's a lot of pressure on women in general to almost just automatically be able to do those things without maybe, you know, if you're neurodivergent, needing reasonable adjustments or additional needs. But actually on women in general, I think there's quite a lot of pressure to be strong and be all right with everything. And when we're not, and you know, now I think that it's time to raise our voices a bit in terms of if we're not okay, then people panic. It seems to be like a bit alien that, you know, it would be all right if a bloke can't cope with all of that. Actually, there's an expectation, and I think that is ingrained in the kids really young. If mine have got a problem, they come to me. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing any more than him, but apparently he's coming to me now.
The other day, he walked past his dad to call me. And the day before, he shouted past his dad to call me for something that he could have just asked him to do. Even though I was getting ready and I was busy, he literally was beside him. His dad was between the two of us, and he shouted past him to call me. But it's true. We put so much pressure on ourselves from a young age to mask. And I know that because Remy's been masking since before she could walk. And it's just natural. It's something that I think we naturally do. And I've made myself ill. Like, I've literally been hospitalized because I put so much pressure on myself from before I was even diagnosed, because I am the most disorganized person I know, but I'm expected to be the most organized person. It's almost forced on me to the point where I make myself ill. And I now try to encourage Remy to be herself. Literally, and now she's very much herself, and she is unapologetically, and I love that. I absolutely adore her, and I think she's amazing, and I want to make sure she knows that, because I don't want her to later on in life be in the position that I'm in, where I've constantly second guessed everything, you know, judged myself, put pressure on myself to the point where I'm ill, and now I'm trying to make myself healthier, so I am there for my kids and able to be, you know, better. But it's hard when it is literally ingrained into our being, but it's just so unhealthy.
I don't think it's a male women thing. I think it's a women
Generation.
in an identity role that whether you're neurodivergent or not, there is a level of masking there for women, and there is a really high social expectation on us.
It's an intersectionality thing as well when it comes to, you've obviously got being women, and then you have very like loads of different other factors. So social status, being neurodivergent, your ethnicity. I mean, I wrote a piece recently about being a brown skinned woman and how that then affects me on a different level when it comes to, this was to do with like maternal health and so on. But we have this stereotype and also, you know, our own separate social expectations where we are expected to be strong, we're expected to carry ourselves in a certain way. Certain women from different religions and different parts of the world will have a whole different experience to all of us. My experience is going to be different to you guys. Corinne's is going to be different because of where she lives in the country. Like, there's so many different layers that affect us in all different ways. And I know for a fact that when I went into labour with Remy, it's the first time I really noticed it, but then it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that I've always experienced it. But I went in labour with Remy, and because I present myself in a way where I'm very calm, I've got a high pain threshold, I don't want to make a fool of myself and be screaming and so on. So I carry myself in a certain way. They never took me seriously, and they kept sending me off I was literally walking up and down the streets of Hackney in labour to the point where I'd had enough, and I felt, you know what, for them to actually listen to me, I'm going to have to act a fool and start screaming. I don't want to, because I've got, maybe it's my ego, I've got too much pride, I don't know. But I went in there and I said, if you can take me in right now, I'm going to have this baby right here because I'm ready. And I lost it. There was another lady beside me who burst into tears, bless her, a young woman who her demeanour was different and she was being seen to. Turned out she wasn't even in labour. I was 10 centimetres dilated and actually ready to go and push and have Remy. And less than an hour later, Remy was born. But had they had taken me seriously when I first went in, I would have got the care I deserved. And unfortunately, this leads to so much issues and, you know, children being lost, women losing their lives, and so on, because of this stereotype that's put out there. And it's seen that, you know, Black women are 5 times more, you know, more prone to having certain experiences because of this cultural difference or the stereotypes and how we're viewed and so on. And yeah, it's just it's definitely a major issue and something that's such a deep topic, because even me being from a poor background, I'm going to have a very different experience to someone else who could be a you know, a Black lady, or, you know, an Asian lady, or whoever, or another white lady could have a very different experience if she's from a poor background in comparison to someone who's Black and from a well-to-do background. There's layers to it. It isn't just race. It isn't just being neurodivergent. It isn't just being a woman. It's everything. Life as a whole affects us all in different ways. And I think that that's something that's really important and should be acknowledged, because again, I know women, so that's why I say it's not just a race thing, because my sister's white, my mum's white, they've had quite similar experiences to me because of how we've been raised and where we've been brought up. So sometimes you can go into somewhere and the way you dress or the way you speak is how you're going to be treated, and so many different things will affect that and how, you know, society sees you and the service that you get, I guess.
It's a shame, isn't it, that you had to play up to that role or that stereotype, though.
I had to be somebody else.
Like, people get dealt with, but actually people that are calm and still in need are not taken seriously, because in that situation the person who is loudest gets the most attention.
But it's also the fear of speaking up as well when you're in that situation, when you're in labour and you're thinking, you know, I need this something to help the pain. I mean, I know I did. I really struggled to, you know, I even struggled to press the button to get the nurse to come in, because I felt like I was a burden. Like, even I was in labour, it was, I'm a burden. They're going to come in, and that don't stop. Even when you're in labour, that feeling and like the way that feels doesn't stop. And like you said, it's only those that shout the loudest when you get to that point is when you finally listen to. But you shouldn't have to get to that point to be heard.
Oh, and also
desperation, literally the
birth
desperation.
Mhm.
but, you know, a birth plan, or you know, I filled out one once. No one even read it. But actually, they should have a section on there for people that have got sensitive when they're having a baby and those reasonable adjustments. And they don't.
Well, the
And
problem
that also is overwhelming.
they say, oh, let's not tell anyone. Let's just say you have anxiety. That's what happened to me.
Yeah, but I wasn't even diagnosed back then as
Yeah.
well. That's
And the
another
worst thing is I was.
Yeah.
I sat there with my midwife, and I mean, Dean's here, he can back this up. But me and Dean sat in the appointment. It was the first one where they like book you in and stuff. And they were like, oh, do you have any pre-existing conditions, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, like I've suffered with anxiety, which I have. And at the time, because I wasn't really clued up on neurodiversity, I didn't know what the word meant. But I knew I had an autism diagnosis from childhood. So I said, oh, I've got childhood diagnosis of autism. And she sat there and she went, sort of looked at Dean, looked at me, and then she was like, oh, you have quite a supportive partner. What's your network like? And I went, oh yeah, like my mum, blah blah blah, like listed off all these people. She went, I'm just gonna put that you have anxiety. So then I was like, right, I can't say to anyone that I'm autistic because they're gonna take my baby off me. That was the A to B.
Like, can't you spell autism then?
Well, now I'd be like, pardon, like now I'd speak up, but
Yeah,
I couldn't advocate for myself. I didn't know what the word advocate meant.
It's so important for the communication side of things, even when if it comes to them trying to give you potentially life-saving advice during your labour and need to communicate with you. Yeah, because even when they kept sending me away, they're the professionals to me, and it's the kind of like the authority in the situation. So to me, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just go out again. They wouldn't even put me in a room. I was out in the public waiting room of the dirty hospital or up and down the high street in Homerton, which if you know the area, you probably won't, but it's not the greatest. This like was the dregs of Hackney. I mean, of London, sorry. And so in my mind, okay, you're sending me away. But I was literally, I could feel I was ready to push because I was fully dilated. And I went back in, and when she said to me again, I'll just go away and come back in a couple of hours. I was so desperate. And that's when I thought, do you know what?
You need to kick off.
Yeah. Because they'd sent me away about 4 or 5 times and I'd been there all day. And it was now like, I think Remy was born just after 1 a.m. And that's what I had to do. Otherwise, I would have been back out there again and potentially out of in the hallway.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it, the experiences you have? Because when I had Lorcan, I was accused of being a thief.
What?
Yeah, in the hospital. So
licking the gas.
What is there to steal?
No. So they in the maternity bit, because he's £9. Like, it was nearly £9 born. He's proper round. He's like a Christmas turkey, right? And them little bottles in the hospital, he would drain them. So at that point, like 16 years ago, you could just go to a cupboard and help yourself.
Yeah,
They had little bottles and little teats, and you would take a bottle, take a teat, and feed your baby. So I would have to take 2 or 3 of them, right? Because he was like, he'd literally like burp afterwards and want another one. He'd be like, come on, where's my phone? So I was giving him like 2.5, which is about 9 ounces from birth. And he slept all night from birth. Right? It's like desperate Dan. He was like, gog, sleep. And I remember he had a baby grown, it said milk built this body, and he was like proper butch. And she said to me, I've noticed that you keep going to the cupboards quite a lot. Would it be all right if we look in your bag?
That's awful.
That's disgusting.
And I was like, you can look in the bin. I was like, he's hungry.
He's hungry.
You can look in the bin. She was like, it's just that we have like a certain limit that, and I was like, well, he thought it was an all you can.
How about do your job and see what, you know, the baby's taking in. They're supposed to ask you these questions.
Brendan had to go to Boots to buy them because they wouldn't give me anymore because he was drinking 2 or 3 at a time. I was only there 24 hours, but he'd probably done about 10 of them. And I'd imagine they just thought he was just going to have 1 or 2, stingy on the old milk. But when I went, I mean, this is just an example, I suppose, of how much money the NHS did have and now they haven't. because when I went with Oscar, they didn't have it available at all.
No, yeah.
They didn't
No,
when
they
I
didn't
It
have
was
that.
gone.
See, Brody, we could
Lorcan
get
had drunk it all.
not the milk. Lorcan drunk it.
Lorcan had drunk it all.
Drink a year's worth in a day.
But yeah, when I had Oscar, that wasn't even a thing. I just had some midwife, I think she was Russian or something, Gloria, who I had a cesarean when I had Oscar, and I had bottle green support stockings.
Lovely.
And she kept coming into me saying, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Do you want me to go and get you some pink ones?"
Oh,
That made me feel better. And then she embezzled me some pink support stockings. I'll
amazing.
always remember her. Yeah. But it's just, I suppose, experiences that you have, isn't it? Like we had one other child when I had Lorcan, and it was at a time where the dads were there and then they kind of went again. So I'm on my own. I'm loving it. I had to pay money on this card, and I got like a little screen that came round on the bed so I could watch telly. There was a Magnum machine. I was like, happy days in bed, Magnum, EastEnders on, woman accusing me of nicking the milk. But I obviously fitted into that stereotype of someone that would steal it. Maybe.
I guarantee you, if you looked and spoken a different way, it would have been approached in a different way. And that's the problem.
Yeah, so it's all about, I think those experiences are all about very quick, very
it's snap judgments, isn't it?
yeah, like basically it was assumed because I rocked up and I had flash wipes. I had Brendan cleaning the room, mate. I weren't going in there till we'd cleaned it all. And I think they'd made their mind up that maybe they thought I was a bit of a freeloader and that I was just out for, I was maybe a bit precious, and it wasn't that. I just didn't want to get E. coli. Do you know what I mean?
I had the opposite experience. I was accused of being just there for drugs, basically, because of the because of the medications I was on during my pregnancy with Tommy, because of the EDS, and a lot of them I had to change, and I was a high risk pregnancy for that, and I already knew that we were going to be kept
so bad. It's terrible.
Withdrawal observations and addiction observations on him. I had a lovely anaesthetist, because they said if I had to have a C-section they would have to put me under general, but I was taking my meds as normal, quite strong analgesic, pretty much the strongest you can get by prescription. And thankfully the midwife, I was in I had to be induced because Tommy, he was always a lazy baby, would never move. But the first midwife I had, she looked at my notes and she went, "So you think you're going to get more than paracetamol?" And I said, "No, I've got a whole form. If I need a PCA, I'll have a PCA. An early epidural, needs to be put in just in case." And she went, "Well, I know mothers like you." She said, "Kids having kids, mothers like you're just in here for the hardcore drugs." And I was like,
How
no.
disgusting.
Yeah, we're the same age, and our kids are the same age. So you were 26.
25,
Yeah.
26. Because Tommy was born in December 17. So
Oh, sorry, no, Tommy's
he was 4 months old when I turned 26. Yeah, because I turned 26 in 2018. But it was
So
all
how
because
anyway to accuse you of going in there to get the drugs. You should have said, "I live in Kent. If I want to get drugs, I can."
yeah.
Easy.
But I had a lovely midwife that
I've got some
delivered
meds in the
Tommy.
cupboard. I've still got my ADHD meds. I don't need your shit.
But like this woman, because it had all been set up that I could have my meds in the room, take them as prescribed, as I've been doing for years, she wouldn't have it. No, it has to be in a CD cupboard. It has to be kept under lock and key. You are not to ask for your meds. We will give it to you. And then I never forget, she went off shift on the Saturday night. Her shift ended at 8 o'clock the Saturday night. And she said, "Good luck getting anything covered in gas and air, because you'll have nothing." And she went, "And the baby won't even be born tonight." She said, "And when I come back for my shift tomorrow, I fully expect social services to be on the ward with you."
You should have said to her, "When you come back for this shift tomorrow, love, I'm getting you in a headlock. So get
Getting sacked, mate.
Did you not? Did you
I
report
have
her?
to laugh because
Please tell me contained.
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
But
I said to her, when you come back, I'll have had my son. I said, I know my body. And they made it out that I was only in for an induction because it was before Christmas, because he was due Christmas Eve. I had a lovely midwife that delivered Tommy. She was fantastic. And just as we were being wheeled out from the labour and delivery ward at 9:15 the next morning to go over to like the maternity ward that you have to stay on, that midwife come in and I looked at her and I said, he's a healthy £6 baby and he's scoring 0 on addiction and withdrawal. I said, and I did have him. I said, so what's your problem? Unfortunately, I had a lady that was next to me in the ward who it wasn't her first, second, or even third child that she had that had been taken off of her. And the fourth child she'd gone in for did have to be removed. But the midwife that spoke to me like that on the labour and delivery ward came over to the actual ward. She was involved with that other patient. And as she walked past, she went, well, that's what you get when you start off on medication like you're on for pain. And I was like, don't compare me.
Why is she doing you?
That patient's nothing to do with me. And as awful as it was, when you've got somebody making phone calls to get narcotics dropped off at a hospital, and that's all they're bothered about, and they're talking about how they can smuggle it in through their newborn baby and out, don't lump me in that same class. But apparently because I was in my 20s, I didn't know what I was doing, and disabled women like me shouldn't have children. That's what I was told.
Who
If
said
you
that?
have recognised conditions that and your medication is prescribed for that reason, how dare she put you in the same category?
Because she said that it was a made-up condition, despite it being on the NHS's website, despite having an official diagnosis.
Daniel wasn't told that.
Hang on. What was you diagnosed with?
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, joint hypermobility.
You didn't have the autism diagnosis, just the...
I didn't have the ASD diagnosis, and I think
because my
I
God,
was so worried because at that time, especially like 2015 to 2017, there was a lot of children, a lot of newborns that were being taken off of their parents for abuse and were wrongly being taken off of their parents because one or both parents had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, joint hypermobility. So the babies were born with bruising or they would dislocate. So I very much hyper focused on that. Obviously, I didn't know at the time I was autistic as well. But I remember pushing to get Tommy observed, and I remember them saying that he was extremely floppy. And we were just so fortunate. We had a really, really good midwife help with the delivery and an amazing consultant, because I think if it wasn't for them, I would have lost Tommy, probably. He would have been taken off of me.
That's really sad. And I think that really highlights, Danielle, doesn't it, that there needs to be adjustments made in midwifery for parents that might have disabilities that are not hitting where they should on the chart, because Tommy could have been born with bruising because he's got EDS, because you've got EDS, and because there's not enough awareness, it could have very easily been signposted as abuse. And actually, that's not all right.
No,
it needs to be looking at the bigger picture as well. Because then there's other cases, like obviously I lived near where the whole baby peas thing happened, and they were kind of going, oh, well, you know, it's chocolate or whatever, because it was, oh, well, mum and dad are together and la la la. Like they took that picture and decided it was okay. And it's like, well, no, you need to be looking at the bigger picture. The baby clean? Is, you know, mum happy? Is the baby happy? Have they got this? Have they got that? Have they got support?
The whole setup of that house and how it worked was red flags. And if they'd have lived in any other borough and not Harrogate, if baby P was living in Chelsea, he would have been removed because the child protection
100%.
procedures are completely different. But for some reason, the borough of Harringay, their markers to remove children because of the level of social issues that are there were lower. And that is why baby P's death will never be in vain, or Victoria Climbier, who was also from the same borough, because they changed the law for child protection. Because the law now is that every child in every borough hits the same criteria for removal.
Yeah.
For that, it didn't.
Wow.
It was based on that borough. So what was going on in that borough? What were the social issues in that borough? And what could they mark them on? And that then is why you were treated the way you were, Danielle, because your Ashford area, there's a high drug, because you're on the pathway for county lines in Ashford. That's where the drug deals happen. Because people can get back into London, they can cross that line, they can do the drug deal in London and get it into Kent very easily through Ashford. So therefore, anyone who's within an age bracket in Ashford is earmarked as being a drug runner or a drug addict. You're either selling it or you're taking it. That's not a true picture.
No.
It's a very narrow-minded view, and it is back to that point of all the different factors. It wasn't just the fact that you obviously have your diagnosis and your additional need, but your age, the area that you live in, all of these things. And unfortunately, you've come across someone who should be actually giving you extra support because your situation's already stressful enough as it is. Instead, she's put an extra pressure on you. And many other women now who have certain extra need where they actually need support are apprehensive and scared to even speak up and ask for it, and it's just giving extra stress.
But they add labels to everything and everyone. Like when I had Oscar, I was down as a geriatric mother because I was 35.
That's horrendous.
Geriatric.
I'm 36, so I'm not geriatric.
No wonder Gloria was sticking her head around the door asking me if I wanted some more support stockings. She probably thought I was going to have some sort of aneurysm due to my age.
Well, I don't want any more kids. I'm 31. And I just
think to be honest, to remove pressure on women, I think we've got to stop overperforming.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do ourselves any favours, do we?
No.
But no, because we're doing everything so amazingly. We set the bar, and then when we're not there, people start.
Yeah.
Barbie, isn't it? Have you all seen Barbie? You've all seen.
Sorry.
I haven't seen it yet. No. It's women empowering, though, ain't it? I've heard.
Is it any good?
It's amazing.
No.
It's amazing.
The first part of it, I was starting to question the voices, but then when it got going, I loved it.
No, honestly, I laughed, I cried, and there's this really good monologue in it by America Ferrera, and she plays actually a character called Gloria, and shout out to Glorious today. Sorry, and she does this really amazing monologue, and it's essentially everything that women can and can't do. So it's like, you have to be grateful, you have to be happy, you have to be thin, but you can't be too thin, but you can't ever say you want to be thin, you want to say that you're healthy. And it goes on and on, like it's an amazing monologue. I'll show it to you. It's so good. And to me, that monologue kind of sums everything up. Like I did a post a couple of years ago, and it was something like, you mean to tell me that I have to look after my baby, keep it alive, I can't give it screen time, I have to be doing educational stuff with it all the time, I have to be feeding it healthy meals, I'd be keeping myself healthy, I need to still have a good sex life, I need to still go see my friends, I need to be a good wife, I need to be a good partner, a good daughter, I need to do all of that and still be a size 8 and do that on like 3 hours sleep. We're just meant to do all those things. And it went absolutely batshit. And I just wrote it like 3 a.m. randomly and then posted it, didn't think anything of it. And I think it touched such a nerve with people because it is such a universal truth that we're just expected to do all these things and meet markers. And there were so many people that were like, well, you put these pressures on yourself. And I'm like, no, because if I don't do all these things, I'm seen as less than. Like, there are still people who the only time they're proud of me is when I lose weight. Like that's sometimes the most.
What's that saying?
Like, like that's the biggest achievement you can do is lose weight. And it's like, no. Like I think it was J.K. Rowling. I know J.K. Rowling's a bit controversial now, but I remember she, I think she'd brought out the Goblet of Fire, and she went to something and someone saw her, and she just had a baby and she'd released a book, and obviously huge book. And they went, oh, you look really well, you've lost weight. And she was like, I cannot believe out of all the things that I've achieved this year, like I've literally created my body, given birth to it, had my other children, had written a flipping massive book, like best-selling, amazing book. And the thing you want to talk to me about is whether or not I've lost weight.
appearance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
This
Like that.
generation breaks the mold though, because like Charlotte's son, I've like, my daughter is grown. She's 22, so I'm hoping I put enough in to make her a half decent human being. But I think we're all boy mums in terms of children, apart from Charlotte, who's raising a girl. And I really like that this generation is actually the only achievable goal that you're giving Remy is to be happy in herself and
Yeah.
not explain.
yeah.
And I think that if we can instill that in our boys, that actually nobody, don't personify people, whether they're a girl or a boy. The aim that you need to be, the only thing that you expect in others is that they're happy in their time and space, they're happy with who they are, and remove those pressures, because this is almost historic subconscious bias that we are dealing with, because our mums felt those pressures and they've instilled them in us. So a lot of it is inherited.
Generation.
If we break, it is, and you know, I love that you know, you've broken that in Remy, and if she has children, that won't be something that passes down, because it's not there, it's not a thing. The main expectation on of your daughter is that she's happy in herself, and that she knows she doesn't have to explain herself to anybody. You know, I remember being told off when I was upset when I was younger. I wasn't asked how I was. I was up. I was a pain in the ass because I was screaming, and I would get told off for making a fuss, or being told don't be silly. And what that is doing is you're teaching your children that having feelings are silly, and that wasn't something that my parents did purposely. That's because that's how they were brought up.
How we were
And I
raised.
think that it's about discipline, isn't it? There was a big focus. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. There's a big focus on discipline and people knowing their place.
In the hierarchy.
I mean, don't get me wrong. With my kids, I do expect a certain level of discipline, and I expect them to be decent human beings. I expect them to be well behaved, be kind, be, you know, thoughtful, and those kind of things. But the reason why I put such a focus on happiness and, you know, just them being happy in whatever it is they want to do or be or anything, and how they express themselves, is because firstly, I want, when she is upset about something, I want her to know that actually I can go to my mum and speak to her and not shy away from that or be scared to come to me because I'm going to disregard her feelings. But also, I find that when my kids are their happiest, they then not perform, but the way that they approach their challenges is always with better results, whether it be, you know, academics that people are so, you know, focused on. They're always going to have better results or outcomes in all areas when they're approaching them with happiness and confidence and that kind of attitude. Because I know, me personally, when I'm happy, my life is in a better order and everything just goes much better. If you're approaching things sad and depressed and with already this attitude that you can't do it, you're not going to be able to do it, or you can, but maybe with less of a good result. So I found it with Chase initially, if I'm honest, and now I'm seeing it with Remy as well. But it's just, I want you to be happy because other things will follow, and if not, that's all right as well. But I'd much rather you be happy than miserable with the top marks and all these other things. And I make sure I tell their teachers that as well. I'm like, look, I don't put any pressure on my kids when it comes to their schoolwork. Yes, I expect them to try their best, but if it's not for them, something else will be. But as long as they're happy, that's all I care about. And
See, I was like, I'm one of 7, and there is 20 years between me and my little sister. So my mum basically had 3 sets of kids in 3 different generations, like the 90s, the early noughties, and like the 2010s. And obviously, I don't have a relationship with my mum now, but when I did, it's when I used to see her with my little sister, who's like nine, and how she's with her now compared to how I felt on how she was as a parent when I was growing up with my older brother. I kind of feel it's a bit of a like an envious feeling. Like I feel really, it's quite sad because I'm like, that's the mom that I always wanted. But because she was of that generation where she followed where her mom was, like when my nan used to parent, it was the, you know, kids should not be seen and not heard. I remember going to my nan's house and we'd all be shoved in the front lounge while all the adults were in the kitchen having a chit chat, and we weren't allowed to leave the lounge until the adults were done with their chit chat. And like now, when she takes them around there, they're all like, and I know obviously for my mum, she's had to change her parenting because of the way the generation goes. But it's kind of like, it's sad because it's like we're then that lost generation that didn't have parents that were so supportive like they are now. Like things like, you know, I wanted to be an actor when I was younger. I did performing arts. I love drama. And I'd get things like my mum like, well, you ain't going to get a job out of it, so why do you want to do it? Like things like that then would go, well, I can't do that now. I'm never going to do that. Whereas with my siblings, especially my little siblings, it's always, you know, you can do this. We're going to support you. One of my little brothers, he went through a stage of was unsure about his gender. Which was a big, you know, a lot for my mum, obviously from that generation was a lot for her to deal with, but she was so supportive of him. And now I know, like, if it was, I suppose, way back then, she probably wouldn't be as supportive.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's
I
like,
think it's around social education as well, isn't it? And
yeah,
people evolve. Like the mum you had is not the mum they've got, because it's a completely different.
yeah.
Oh,
And that trauma sits there. And it's not like she didn't, you know, we didn't get physically attacked, but it's all very much so trauma that's stuck with me forever. And there's little situations now, even when I'm parent my own kids or when I'm out and about, and little things trigger things from the past, and it's like, and then it makes me feel rubbish as a female. And I think that's why I'm so like, I love how, obviously I haven't got girls, I've got boys, but I love how with my boys now, I'm like, whatever you want to do when you're older, you do it, and we will support you. And you know, if I don't know, it feels I want my kids to be and live a life that I never really felt I had.
yeah.
I
And
think
I
you're
think that's
gentle as a parent. I think you're gentle as a parent, and I think you can. For me, relating to you, I can feel that level of trauma that you had. Like I said, used to get told off for being upset when I was younger.
always.
I just feel like I was a pain in the ass, but actually I probably was a pain in the ass because I did used to
Mhm.
cry a lot when I was little, and I probably did that for reactions in people.
Mhm.
I think now we're all parents, you realise some of the difficulties that our parents faced. Like at one point they were us sitting here going, my parents did this, my parents did that. And we've all only ever been on the planet once. This is my first time on Earth that I know of. It's almost like all a big experiment.
Mhm.
I've not been a parent of an autistic child before. I'm just doing what I think, and I'm finding out as much as I can. And I think that's what your mum was doing when she parented you. She was not doing it intentionally. She was probably
Doing
using
what her
the
mum taught
education
her.
available to her with the skills that she had. And the results might not have been good enough, but they might have been her best.
Yeah.
So,
And I know, like, my mum, looking back, my mum, she has a lot of childhood trauma, and I know that would have kind of not helped the way she was as a parent. So I feel sorry for her as well. I feel sorry for her because she didn't have a mum that was actually quite loving. So it's kind of carried on that. And I think I don't know, the generation now are kind of breaking those, what's it?
Cycle break.
Cycle breakers.
I want to be one of my kids.
Yeah.
I'd love to
I
be
would
my
love to be.
kid. Well, like what I've learned majorly in the most recent years since my diagnosis, and how I feel and the pressures I have every day and just how everything affects me. My mum, I know, is undiagnosed. And when I think back to the struggles that she had and how she was brought up and the times and everything, I do have a certain level of empathy for her. As much as I do get upset about certain things when we were growing up and the life that we lived and so on, I also always try to remember that actually she's undiagnosed, but then she's also a very different person to me. So she's softer. She's not someone who would speak up. And so it's the personality that she has that isn't mine. I'm quite outspoken and have the confidence to say certain things, but she didn't have that. But she also had all the challenges that I faced. So it's like an additional pressure. And I also know that I come from a long line of generational, failures. Many of my family, I know for generations going back, were undiagnosed. with certain neurodiversities, like neurodivergent conditions. You know, a lot of us have lived in poverty and are from a low class background, and it's really hard to break that mold, you know. When I like what Corinne said, when you know, when we're parenting our kids, and every so often we get those triggers because we think of our childhood, whereas we are one set of people who want to break the mold, so we do things because we don't want our children to have what we had. But there are also a lot of people out there who have our upbringing and unfortunately continue with the cycle because it's all they know and they don't know any different. And so yeah, it's always, I guess, give ourselves an extra pat on the back for trying to break that mold, give our kids what we didn't have. You know, when we think of what they want to be when they're older, I always try to put them into clubs and get them all the things that I wish I had. But I always try to remember that actually my mum would have loved to have done certain things for me, but she just wasn't able for many different reasons. And it's quite sad, really. But I love when she every so often she would just say, do you know what? I'm so happy that your children have you as their mum because you're able to give them all them things that I weren't able to give to you. And it's, so that kind of gives me a little boost to know, you are right. And she sees that.
I think you're a really good advocate for your mum, Charlotte, and I think that your mum's really proud of you because I know that you really look after your mum, and I think that you recognize that her journey was hers and that has impacted on who you are, but also it is the reason why you're as strong as you are.
I always try to remember that, actually. Even being not diagnosed until I was an adult, a lot of the time it does make me feel really sad. Like if I did have that support from young, where would I be now? But I also know that it's made me the person that I am, and the reason why I am able and maybe more resilient than somebody else who might be more of a delicate flower is because I was made to grow up quickly and had to face it. Like sometimes I'm with my kids and I'm like, you do realize that no one in my family used to drive. I think I'm like the first woman in my family to drive. We went through times where we had no heating and hot water. My mum struggled to feed us. Like, I always make sure they recognize that actually there's children out there who are living in them situations still. And even though some people might look on and think I spoil my kids, but I make sure they really appreciate everything they have and that they hear of where I came from. But not just that, like sometimes there's been times when I've felt guilty or been made to feel guilty speaking about my childhood. But I always say, you know, I want to raise awareness and talk about what I've been through in a way that's still respectful to my mum, but still be able to own it and say, this is what I've been through. I shouldn't have to hide that but my mum gets it. She always says, you know, I'm happy that you are able to, you know, acknowledge what we've been through and change that for your kids. But some people would maybe think it's me bashing her, but it's not.
There's no judgment in what you're saying. You're not judging.
No, I don't judge her. I love my mum to bits. I'd literally do anything for her.
That's what I don't understand when people are like, "Oh, you're being bashing." You're not. You're stating those are facts. Those are things that have happened.
And it's my life. It's important to always speak about your journey, who you are, what you've come from, because it's who you are. And my journey is a massive part of it is my childhood and how I was brought up. And some people would see it as bashing, but if they saw the relationship I have with my mum, I absolutely adore her and she adores me and we get on great. But in order for me to get over certain things and also just let other people out there know that, you know, that's how me and Corinne have you know, managed to relate in a certain way because we've got very similar backstory. People listening to this will also be able to have things that resonate with them. But it's not because I'm bashing her, it's just an acknowledgement of this is what I've been through, but also know why I went through that. It's not my mum's fault. You know, she was parenting at a time where things were really difficult. But we still got all of the love. Like my mum never made me question her love for us. I know some children who their parents have got loads of money, but they don't ever get a hug or told that they're loved. Like never question her love for us. It's just we did go through really bad times that were upsetting. But it's like I said, it's made me who I am. So
your journey makes you the person you are today. So shapes you. That's the saying, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's how you then, I guess, go forwards, because again,
Yeah.
some people would be walking around bitter and angry and mean and not very nice people. So yeah,
I've been through that bit. I'm kind of at the end now where I'm like,
well, like, I think you shouldn't be hard on yourself. Like, I used to be really bitter about certain things that happened to me when I grew up, and it's not, so I was brought up as like in a single parent household, and there was just certain things that happened, and again, like, none of it's anyone's fault. It's just a lot of stuff happened. And actually, the reason I got up, there's a book I read, and this is actually my mum's, and I ended up reading it. It's called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Very, very old book. This is like a 1990 edition. But it's really good for kind of having empathy for your parents and little you. And yeah, like, I can now look at certain people in my life who maybe at one time I had a lot of anger for, and now I have so much empathy for them. And it's actually really healing, because you just think, actually, it's not saying, you're not going around going, oh, it's no one's fault and no one take accountability. They can still take accountability for what they did or didn't do. Your feelings are still valid, but you kind of look at them with a different framework and kind of go, actually, like, through a different lens. Like, I can look at certain people in my life and I can view how maybe their life was when they were a small child, and then how that would have impacted them. And actually, when certain things happened, they were only in their 20s, so they wouldn't have had the, they wouldn't have had the support or the ability. And especially when you're going back to like the early 90s, the 80s, there wasn't a lot of empathy. There wasn't a lot of, and I don't know about you girls, like my family, like the way my mum was brought up, like, everyone just listened to their elders. So
always.
my mum was trying to parent and having so much input from people much older.
Yeah.
And I remember when I had Brody, it was really triggering for her, like my mum, because I was like, no, mum, I'm doing it like this. And she was like, no, but you should do it like this. And I'm like, no, mum, I'm doing it like this. And she did not like it. And now it's really funny, because my brother's about to have a baby, and she's completely different. I think it is different though when it's your daughter to your son.
Yes. Yeah.
And but she's been completely different. She's like, oh yeah, actually, I shouldn't have said that, should I? I'm like, no, mum, you shouldn't. Like, there was I remember when he was 3 months old, and she's like, right, when are you going to start giving him food? And I'm like, in 3 months. When he's right age, he's 6 months old. And she was like, no, he's hungry. I was like, no, he's fine.
that works, because she also learns from us. But my mum, I always refer to her as the oracle, because whenever I need to know something, whatever it may be, I guarantee I'll call her and she'll have an answer when it comes in. And so I always call her, like, and then she will give me some tips and advice and whatever. But I find with my mum, it's mostly life experience that I more teach her about. So like, if I want to chat, if there's times when I wanted to change career, or when I wanted to start driving, or when whatever it may be, she's always kind of like, no,
push the envelope a bit.
Stay, she's like, don't change, stay. It's like, you've got a good job, stay. Or why do you need to worry about driving for? Don't waste your time. Or don't hold on and push for the house. Just take the flat they're offering you, because it's something, otherwise you're going to miss out. And I'm always like, have you seen that meme with Usher? And he's like, watch this, watch. And I'm like, yeah, just watch this, right? You will see. Just trust me. And I push. I always want the best. And she stopped one day and she was like, do you know what? You were right, actually. I'm glad that you didn't listen to me, because now you are driving, you do have a house, you're doing things in life, and your career is where it should be, and you're happier. Even back to when she used to say I was too harsh on men because I had a certain expectation. I didn't take no disrespect, or wouldn't allow a man to treat me in a certain way. She's like, oh, you'll just end up alone. And I said, no, I'm going to end up
alone. Then do dusty man's bullshit.
No, but she absolutely adores T. And she again said to me, do you know what, actually, you were right. And I'm so glad you didn't listen to me, because look at you now. And I love that, because at the time she kind of gets a bit of a bee in her bonnet because I'm not listening to her. And I'm like, mum, just watch. Okay, trust me. And then she comes, she's like, oh, I'm so happy. I love watching all the stuff you're achieving, because you weren't scared and holding back because of me, and that's what I would do. And she said, and I just wish that I had the confidence and the drive to do what you've done, because she admits she'd be a much happier person. And I think that it's important that people always remember that life gives you experiences and changes your views and your perception. You like, do you know what I mean? Back in the day, there were certain things that were frowned upon, and there was awful things that happened to do with racism and stuff around the world. But always remember that actually people can change, times do change, you know. And I think when it comes to the generations of our grandparents, it was more to do with the world they lived in and what they knew and the ignorance. Because even if you think about 10 years to when we first started advocating for our kids, there was also a lot of ignorance and people didn't know much, and we have to give them the opportunity to change, which is why even when I come across people who can be a bit ignorant towards my kids and me and our needs, and they may say things wrong or have the wrong view, I try not to get angry anymore, and I just appreciate the fact that actually the times we're in is the times that are changing, and we have to give people the opportunity to embrace what we're saying and change. And I guess that goes with everything, really, doesn't it? Just giving them the positive view and helping them change their perspective
as well, like giving them the education. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is draining when you feel like you're constantly having to advocate, constantly having to educate. And I'm really fortunate because my family is so divergent. Like my mum's side of the family, it's never been an issue. Dean's family have always been great. I mean, Dean's granddad's 88 and he will quite happily roll around on the floor of Brody and not think anything. He honestly is Brody's biggest fan. So, you know, they've never judged him, and like they've always, like, they might ask questions, but they've never judged him or judged us or anything like that. So yeah, for me, I always, like, I know how lucky I am to have that, because a lot of families aren't like that even now. Or they'll say things and it's like, oh, like it's hard, isn't it? Because like, say if someone says the wrong word, like if someone says neurodiverse rather than neurodivergent, like I'm never gonna have a go at you unless you're a professional, then I will have a go at you. But if you're not a professional, just learning, I'll never have a go at you. It's like when people say high functioning, low functioning. Yeah, we don't use those words anymore. But if you use it, you don't know the context.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll go at you like there's bigger fish to fry. Do you know what I mean? Or like Asperger's is a big one. People are like, you can't use Asperger's, and I'm like, well, if someone's 40 and they got diagnosed with Asperger's,
thank you. That grates my nerves, especially a neurodivergent person that can't
see that
or struggle with change.
that's
their identity.
Yeah, I think there's a certain, this is probably the wrong way to put it, but like there's, I shouldn't say breed, that's the wrong word, but like there's a certain type of autistic person, generally the younger generation, but not all of the younger generation, because some of the older ones do this as well. But I mean, autistic people generally, we're quite pedantic, we're quite black and white thinkers. They hyperfixate on something, and they it's that strong sense of justice, isn't it? It's like you have to just do it correctly, and it's completely right, and it has to be, this is the wording that we use now. And I mean, look, I'm of Jewish heritage. If anyone should have a problem with Asperger's, it should be me, right? They took Jewish kids out of the concentration camps and were doing experiments on them to study autism, right? That's why it all got.
That's where the name comes from.
Yeah, that's where the name comes from, Hans Asperger. But my thing is, it was a recognised medical condition. Unfortunately, yes, the history is really awful, and I'm glad that it's no longer a thing, and I'm glad that we no longer celebrate that man. But all the same, that was a diagnosis. That's a medical diagnosis that was given to someone, and Asperger's is a different classification, I guess. To autism is seen now.
But they used to diagnose autism as low functioning, high functioning.
That's me. So I was diagnosed autistic in 1996, and as low functioning autistic, which now would be autism and global delay. All the time, because we're learning more all the time. So I think there needs to be a level of tolerance, as much as that can be really hard. And like I say, we're saying this to quite a pedantic audience, but there does need to be a level of tolerance. It's like the singer example. He's 41.
Oh yeah.
Love kickstarts again. Sorry if
I'm not sure how old he is, but I know he's not that much older than me, so
he's
about
41,
right.
42, and he went on Stephen Bartlett and he was saying, I was diagnosed Asperger's, and so many people kicked off, and I was like, but that's the man's diagnosis.
It's not just that, but it's his identity, and we're speaking about neurodivergent people. And if you're such an advocate, you would know that a neurodivergent person struggles with change, but you want them to change literally their being.
Literally.
And also,
They're who they, you know, who they are.
and also, like, for me, I mean, I don't know the man, but watching the interview he did with Stephen Bartlett, there was clear, it was very, very clear to me he struggled with a lot of internalized ableism, and that's a whole other
Mhm.
topic I think maybe we can talk about that
Yeah,
next week. And internalized ableism does kind of swing in quite neatly into this, actually, because of the way, especially women, like, you know, we want to be seen as perfect and blah blah blah, so we're harder on ourselves, and therefore
Mhm.
won't advocate for ourselves the same way, or we might not meet our needs the same way. And I know I'm really guilty of that even now. And someone done a post, I'm not going to say who because she's only just put it up, but she did a post and it was about her son, and a teacher turned around to her and said, oh, he really doesn't want to be different, he wants to be like as less different as possible, like this kid.
Mhm.
And she was really upset about it, and I was like, to be fair, I can remember feeling like that up until very recently. Like, all I want to do is be the same as everyone else, and I
Yes.
set myself up to be like, why can't I just be like everyone else, and why can't I just sit there and be quiet and just get on with it? Why have I always got to do something? And then it ends up being a big fucking problem.
And there's
Right?
still times now where we think that, you know, especially when you're having a really bad time or really struggling in your life.
I don't want to go into this, but like what's happened recently, like, you know, we've had a bit of a, I don't want to say difference, but there's been a whole social media thing. Even with that, like, even during that discourse, I was like, why can't I just sit here and shut up? Why can't I just be quiet? But that's just not in my nature. I can't be quiet. If I don't like something, or if something's upset me, I will make it clear.
You're not going to conform.
Even if I don't do it verbally, it's normally clear by my behaviour. So
You're not going to conform, and I think that's actually a quality, because if everybody conformed and followed just for an easy dive, or just not to make a sound and not to make a fuss, what the hell kind of world would we live in today?
Well, it causes what's happening now in other countries.
Yeah, and throughout history.
Yeah.
I might still be, well, I wouldn't exist because my mum, it would have been illegal for my mum and dad to even be with each other.
Yeah.
But
well, I would be dead.
So and God knows how the world would be, because people wouldn't have spoke out against what Hitler was doing, you know, or slavery wouldn't have been abolished, and
apartheid,
so on and so forth. So you don't conform.
Treated, and, you know, trans wouldn't even be a thing. Like, it's we need these diversities in the world. We need that. We need that for the world to function. And conforming never ends well.
No.
There have been times that I've been really hard on myself for that and thought, oh, like, I wish I could in a way. Like, but then, like you say, that's not a good quality to really have. But yeah, there was a point to this, and I've now forgotten it. If anyone's listened to the podcast intro, and I'm literally like, we will forget what we were saying mid-sentence. Here it is. Here it is. I will literally have a point, and I'm like,
just talking about
yeah. So it was clear to me that he had a lot of internalized ableism. That was the first time that he had spoken about it, and like publicly. And I had so many messages that day, like, oh my God, examples, autistic, you should talk about this. And I was like, I don't really want to, because I feel like that's kind of his business. Like, I'm not gonna talk about it. You know, one of my best friends, she's a massive mega fan of him. Like, she made me go see him in like last year. She was like, come to this gig with me. I was like, okay. She's like, I have to go see him. And I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll go. And he was really good, actually. But you know, it was clear to me he even struggled to open up about that. And there is a certain generation that are scared to talk about these things because it's weakness. I know it's seen as weak. So, you know, and I think that's kind of where that piece comes from. But yeah, that was my point, and I have nothing else to say now. It's like a steam engine. It's gone.
Well, it's like the post, you know, the post I did when I was trying to get a collage of people who are ADHD on the mixture. And the only responses I got, well, 99% of the responses I got were all from white women.
Yeah.
There was no, I think there was 2 men and 1 or 2 black women. That was it. And so it kind of killed my plan, because the plan was to show the mixture and all the diverse people who are ADHD. And I realized actually men and women from certain cultures and backgrounds and so on aren't as comfortable speaking up. So it is definitely a thing. And obviously we know with like men's mental health and so on, they don't like to speak up. And I wrote about it, and I said that I believe that it is to do with social pressures from certain ethnicities and backgrounds and men. We are expected to be strong, not make a fuss, not make a scene, just deal. And unfortunately, it does lead to mental health.
Well, for a lot of
Really.
people, they don't physically feel safe. But I know people who are in my DMs, and I know they're neurodivergent. They know they're neurodivergent. They won't ever talk about it publicly because they don't feel safe. I mean,
loads of people. I have family members who have got amazing stories to tell, and they've asked me to write blogs for them, and I've written the blogs for them and helped them do it. And then they said, actually, no, I can't.
Yeah.
I said, that's okay. If anything, at least you have this and it helps you.
It's
and if ever you do
cathartic for them, isn't it?
yeah, I'm always here. I'm always happy to share your story, but they aren't happy with doing that. And I that's okay, because everyone deals with it differently. You know, there's people in my parent group who are just there to observe, and they find so much comfort in that, but they would never speak in there. They'll just maybe once and again, I'll get a random message saying, you know what, I've been in your group for ages. I just wanted to reach out and say thank you so much. It's really helped me so much. I'm just not comfortable interacting, but even just seeing and hearing other people speak really helps me. And we have to respect how other people want to express themselves.
I think it shows. That's why it's so important, like the work that we're doing and all the other advocates that are out there doing, all the content creators. You know, the whole TikTok thing gets a really bad rep, and it's not only people diagnosing themselves through TikTok, but actually these things are often a lifesaver. And that's the only way. Like for me, going on Instagram and TikTok was the first time I saw myself represented in Charlotte. You know what I mean? I remember it was the first time I was like, oh, there are other people that are parenting autistic kids and they're autistic themselves, because I didn't have that what didn't exist. So it's, you know, and it wasn't talked about. So I'm so happy, and I said this last time we spoke, like I'm so happy that, you know, like for my son and his generation and all our kids that are coming through now, they're going to have themselves represented in the media. And it is important. It is important. Like you can't say, like when people are, why are they making Barbie dolls with one leg and fat Barbies and whatever, like why are they doing that, and just keep it the same, and why is Little Mermaid got to be black and blah blah blah. All of that stuff is so important. We need that so everyone feels beautiful, everyone feels worthy, everyone feels like they have a place in this world. And you know, I'm saying that as a white woman who up until 2 years ago was slimmer. Do you know what I mean? Like I was the blonde hair, blue-eyed, slim white woman, and I still felt out of place. So you know, if you're not in that demographic, it must be even more so. So
what does that say about a person as well who doesn't think that other people should be acknowledged and made to feel like they are included?
I just don't want the change.
Go and have a look in the mirror and ask yourself that question again. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys. I think that's quite a good place to wrap it up.
Yes.
Right, that's all we have time for today on the Unfiltered podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and subscribe, as it helps us get seen. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at UnfiltHERed, and you can also join our Patreon. Our Patreon is £5 a month, and in that you get exclusive blogs, podcasts, bonus episodes, and Q&As of us all. All the links for those are in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and remember that
the her is no longer silent. Thank you for listening, and make sure to like and subscribe.